Welcome back to Beyond the Silent Woods, where we venture into the darkest corners of America's forgotten places to uncover stories that time tried to bury. I'm your host, and tonight we're going deep into the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia to tell you a story so disturbing, so unthinkable, that when it was first discovered in 1984, authorities sealed the files for 20 years. What you're about to hear isn't folklore. It isn't legend. This is documented truth, a truth that reveals what can happen when a family isolates itself from the world for generations, creating their own twisted reality in the shadows of the silent woods. This is the story of Anna Whitlock and the secret that nearly destroyed her. March 14th, 1984. A social worker named Margaret Hayes was driving down a winding dirt road in rural Pendleton County, West Virginia, accompanied by Sheriff Tom Bradshaw and Deputy Frank Morrison. The road was barely visible, overgrown with weeds and branches that scraped against their vehicle like skeletal fingers. They were heading to a place most locals refused to talk about. A place that existed on old county maps but seemed to have been erased from memory. The Whitlock farmhouse. Margaret's hands trembled as she clutched the emergency report. 3 days earlier, a visiting county nurse had stumbled out of those woods with a story that seemed impossible in modern America. A story about a 16-year-old girl and a ceremony, a wedding ceremony. But here's where it gets twisted beyond comprehension. The groom wasn't some boy from a neighboring farm. The groom wasn't even a stranger. The groom was Anna Whitlock's own father. Let that sink in for a moment. In 1984, while the rest of America was watching the Olympics and listening to Michael Jackson, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, a father was preparing to marry his teenage daughter. As Margaret's vehicle climbed higher into the mountains, passing under ancient oaks that blocked out the afternoon sun, she kept asking herself the same question. How could something like this happen? How could a child be groomed, manipulated, and prepared for something so horrific without anyone knowing? The answer, as she would soon discover, was isolation. Complete and total isolation. The Whitlock farmhouse sat at the end of that forgotten road, 35 miles from the nearest town. 35 miles from grocery stores, schools, churches, or any form of civilization. The house itself was a 2-story structure built sometime in the early 1900s, weathered gray by decades of harsh mountain winters. No power lines connected it to the grid. No telephone poles. No mailbox at the road. Nothing that tied this place to the outside world. Sheriff Bradshaw had been lawman in these parts for 23 years, and he'd only been to the Whitlock property twice before. Once in 1962 when there'd been a similar complaint, and once in 1978 for a supposed wellness check. Both times he'd been turned away at gunpoint with warnings about trespassing on God's land. They're religious folk, locals would say with a shrug. Mountain people, they keep to themselves. Always have. But religious isolation was one thing. What was happening inside that farmhouse was something else entirely. As Margaret, the sheriff, and the deputy approached the front porch, they noticed something deeply unsettling. There were no sounds, no radio, no voices, no animals, just silence pressing down on them like a physical weight. The door opened before they could knock. Standing in the doorway was a man in his late 40s with sunken eyes and a long, unkempt beard. Samuel Whitlock, Anna's father. "You have no business here," he said, his voice flat and cold. "This is private property, private family matters." Sheriff Bradshaw stepped forward. "Mr. Whitlock, we have a court order. We need to see your daughter. We need to see Anna." Samuel's jaw tightened. "My wife is sick. We're preparing for a ceremony. You need to leave." Margaret interjected, trying to keep her voice steady. "Sir, we have reason to believe your daughter may be in danger. We're not leaving until we see her." For a long moment, Samuel just stared at them. Then slowly he stepped aside. The inside of the Whitlock home was like stepping back in time. No electricity meant oil lamps and candles. No running water meant buckets and a hand pump in the kitchen. The walls were covered with handwritten Bible verses, but not ones Margaret recognized from any Sunday school. These were passages twisted, reinterpreted, used to justify something unthinkable. And then they saw her. Anna Whitlock sat in a wooden chair in the main room, wearing a white dress that looked homemade, with lace around the collar and sleeves. Her blonde hair had been braided and pinned up. She looked like a bride. She was 16 years old. "Anna," Margaret approached slowly, kneeling down to meet the girl's eyes. "My name is Margaret. I'm here to help you." Anna's blue eyes stared back, emotionless. "Help me with what? We heard there was going to be a ceremony tonight." "Yes." Anna's voice was soft, almost dreamy. "Tonight I become a wife. Tonight I fulfill my purpose." Margaret's stomach turned. "Anna, who are you marrying?" The girl smiled, a strange, distant smile. "My father, of course. He chose me. I'm the special one." In that moment, Margaret Hayes understood the full horror of what had been done to this child. This wasn't just abuse. This was systematic, generational grooming that had warped Anna's entire understanding of love, family, and reality itself. To understand how Anna Whitlock ended up in that white dress, prepared to marry her own father, we need to go back, way back, to the very beginning of her life. Anna was born in that isolated farmhouse in January 1968. Her mother, Ruth Whitlock, had also been born in that house. Ruth's mother before her, too. For 3 generations, no Whitlock woman had ever left that property for more than a day trip to trade goods in town. From the moment Anna could understand words, she was told she was different. She was chosen. She was special in God's eyes. Her mother would brush her hair and whisper, "You're going to take care of the man of the house one day. That's your sacred duty." At age 5, Anna asked why she didn't have siblings like other children she'd heard about. Her father told her, "Because you're the only one worthy, the bloodline must stay pure." She didn't understand what that meant. How could she? She was 5 years old. By age 7, Anna was being taught domestic skills from sunrise to sunset. Cooking, cleaning, sewing, preserving food, taking care of her father's needs, but never reading, never writing beyond the bare basics, never learning about the world beyond those mountains. When she asked about school, her father said, "The outside world is poison. They'll corrupt you, fill your head with lies. You don't need their schools. You have everything you need right here." Anna's entire world was that farmhouse, those woods, and the 2 adults who controlled every aspect of her existence. She never met another child her age, never had a friend, never played games or celebrated birthdays the way other children did. Her life was preparation, training, conditioning. And then came her 13th birthday. On the morning Anna turned 13, her father called her into his study, a small room lined with old books and papers. Sat her down and took her hand. His grip was firm, possessive. "Anna," he said, his voice taking on a ceremonial tone, "today you become a woman. Today you take the first step toward your destiny." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a silver ring with a single small stone. "This," he said, sliding it onto her finger, "is a promise between you and me. When you turn 16, we will be joined. We will become one, as it was with my father and his bride. As it was with his father before him. This is our way. This is God's way for our family." Anna looked at the ring, confused. "Father, I don't understand. Aren't you already married to Mother?" Samuel's face darkened. "Your mother served her purpose. She gave me you, but she's weak, sickly. When the time comes, you will take her place. You will be my wife. You will give me strong children, children who will carry on our pure bloodline." 13-year-old Anna felt something inside her recoil. Some deep instinct telling her this was wrong, but that instinct had been beaten down by years of isolation and indoctrination. "Is this what God wants?" she asked quietly. "This is what I want," Samuel replied. And I am the head of this household. I am God's representative here. To question me is to question him. And so Anna wore the ring, every day, a constant reminder of the promise she'd made. A promise she'd never truly consented to, because she'd never known any other possibility existed. For 3 years, the countdown continued. 3 years of her father's affection becoming increasingly possessive. 3 years of her mother growing more distant, more bitter, more ill. 3 years of Anna being shaped into a bride for her own father. After Anna was removed from the home that March night in 1984, investigators began a thorough search of the Whitlock property. What they found in the attic changed everything. An old steamer trunk locked with a rusted padlock. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some dating back to the 1930s, others from the 1950s and 60s. They were written in different hands by different women, but they all told the same story. One letter, dated 1936, was from a woman named Anna Whitlock. "My father husband says I must be strong, that our children will be pure, that this is God's plan. But I am 14 years old and I am scared. I don't want this, but there is nowhere to go. The mountains are all around us and he says the outside world will destroy us if we leave." Another from 1958, written by a woman named Catherine Whitlock. "I am with child again, my third. My father tells me this is my purpose, to bear his children and keep the bloodline strong. I asked him once why we don't marry outside the family like other people. He struck me and said I was speaking blasphemy. I don't ask any more. Do you understand what this means?" The Whitlock family had been practicing father-daughter incest for at least 3 generations, possibly longer. This wasn't some spontaneous act of madness. This was a deliberate, systematic tradition passed down from father to son, each generation repeating the same twisted cycle. Anna's grandmother had been forced to marry her own father. Anna's mother had been forced to marry hers. And now, in 1984, they were preparing to force Anna into the same nightmare. But there was something even more disturbing in that trunk. A book, handbound with pages filled with dense, cramped handwriting. It was titled The Whitlock Doctrine, on Purity, Bloodlines, and God's True Plan. It was a manifesto, a justification. A religious text written by Samuel's grandfather in the 1920s, using twisted interpretations of biblical passages to justify incest, isolation, and absolute patriarchal control. This family hadn't just hidden in the mountains. They'd created their own reality, their own religion, their own sick version of morality where fathers owned their daughters and bloodline purity was the highest virtue. The night of March 14th, 1984, was supposed to be Anna's wedding night. In the main room of the Whitlock house, investigators found everything prepared. Candles arranged in a circle, a handwritten vow book lying open on a table, 2 chairs positioned facing each other, white flowers picked from the early spring woods. Ruth Whitlock, Anna's mother, was upstairs in bed, too ill to attend, or perhaps too broken to witness her daughter repeat her own fate. Samuel had planned everything meticulously. He'd written out the ceremony himself, a bizarre mixture of traditional wedding vows and biblical passages about submission and duty. "Do you, Anna Marie Whitlock, take me, Samuel James Whitlock, to be your husband, your master, and your guide? Do you promise to obey, to serve, and to bear my children in purity?" That's what Anna would have been asked to say. Those were the words that would have bound her to her father in his twisted version of marriage. But it didn't happen. When Sheriff Bradshaw placed Samuel Whitlock under arrest that night, the man didn't struggle. He simply looked at Anna with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "You were supposed to be the chosen one," he said. "You were supposed to be pure, but you let them poison you. You let the outside world in." Anna just stared at him, tears streaming down her face, still not fully understanding what was happening. In her mind, she'd done something wrong. She'd failed her father. She'd broken her promise. The brainwashing ran that deep. Anna Whitlock was taken into protective custody that night and placed in a specialized care facility for victims of extreme abuse. Ruth Whitlock was hospitalized and later placed in a psychiatric treatment center. Samuel Whitlock was arrested and charged with attempted incest, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit child abuse. But the legal system, as it often does, struggled with how to handle this case. Samuel's defense attorney argued religious freedom. He claimed the Whitlock family had been practicing their faith peacefully for generations and that the government had no right to interfere. He pointed out that no abuse had technically occurred yet, that Anna was physically unharmed, and that the family's isolation was their constitutional right. The judge wasn't buying it. "This court," he said at sentencing, "recognizes that religious freedom is a fundamental right. But that right ends where harm to children begins." This defendant systematically groomed and manipulated his own daughter for years, preparing her for a marriage that would constitute incest, abuse, and a violation of every natural law that governs human decency. This is not religion. This is crime dressed up in religious clothing. Samuel Whitlock was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He served 19 before dying of a heart attack in 2003. But the real story is what happened to Anna. Imagine being told your entire life that the sky is green. Every single day from the moment you can remember, everyone around you says the sky is green. It's always been green. Anyone who says otherwise is lying to you. Then one day someone shows you that the sky is actually blue, but you've spent 16 years believing it was green. Your whole identity, your whole understanding of reality was built on that lie. That's what Anna Whitlock faced. For months, she didn't believe she'd been rescued. She thought she'd been kidnapped. She cried for her father. She insisted that what was happening to her was God's plan and that the authorities were sinners trying to destroy her family. Her therapist, Dr. Linda Morrison, later wrote about the case in a clinical journal with Anna's permission, and identifying details changed. Dr. Morrison described Anna's deprogramming as one of the most challenging cases of her career. Anna had no framework for understanding healthy relationships, Dr. Morrison wrote. She'd never seen two people interact as equals. She'd never experienced love without control. She didn't understand concepts like consent, autonomy, or personal boundaries. Everything had to be built from scratch. The questions Anna asked during her first year of therapy broke the hearts of everyone who worked with her. If father isn't my husband, then who am I supposed to love now? Why is it wrong if I wanted to make father happy? What's my purpose if I'm not supposed to have his children? Am I a bad person because I still miss him sometimes? Anna's recovery was slow, painful, and nonlinear. Some days she made progress. Other days she regressed, falling back into the patterns and beliefs that had been drilled into her for 16 years. She had to learn everything most people take for granted. She had to learn that she had the right to say no, that her body belonged to her, not to any man. She had to learn that disagreeing with someone didn't make her evil or disobedient. She had to learn that the world outside the Whitlock farmhouse wasn't full of demons and temptation, that most people were kind, that education was a gift, not a threat. She had to learn what healthy love looked like, that it wasn't about ownership or control or duty, that it was supposed to feel safe, not terrifying. She attended her first real school at age 17, placed in special education classes to catch up on the education she'd been denied. Her first day, she cried in the bathroom because there were so many people, so much noise, so much newness, but she persevered. At age 19, Anna got her GED. At 21, she took her first college class. At 25, she graduated with a degree in social work. Yes, social work, the very field that had saved her. Anna wanted to help others like her, others who'd been hidden away, groomed, abused, and told that their suffering was love. In 2004, 20 years after her rescue, Anna agreed to participate in a comprehensive study on generational incest and its effects. Part of that study included DNA testing. The results were devastating. Anna's DNA showed severe genetic markers consistent with multi-generational inbreeding. But more than that, the genetic analysis revealed something that made even seasoned researchers sick to their stomachs. Samuel Whitlock wasn't just Anna's father. He was also her grandfather. Think about what that means. Samuel's father had impregnated his own daughter, Samuel's sister mother. That child, Samuel, then impregnated his own daughter, Ruth. And Ruth gave birth to Anna. 3 generations of father-daughter incest. 3 generations of children born from the most fundamental violation of human taboo. The genetic consequences were already beginning to show in Anna. Increased risk of certain genetic disorders, unusual autoimmune responses, issues that might affect any children she chose to have in the future. The Whitlock family's obsession with bloodline purity had done the exact opposite of what they'd intended. They'd weakened the bloodline, corrupted it, damaged it in ways that would echo through generations. When Anna learned the truth about her genetics, she made a decision. She would never have biological children. The cycle ended with her. "I won't let this horror continue," she told her therapist. "Even if it means my family line dies with me, some things are better left to end." Ruth Whitlock, Anna's mother, spent years in psychiatric care after being removed from the farmhouse. For the first few years, she was nearly catatonic, unable or unwilling to speak about what had happened. But in 1991, as her health declined, Ruth finally broke her silence. She requested to speak with Margaret Hayes, the social worker who'd helped rescue Anna. In a hospital room in Charleston, West Virginia, Ruth told her story. "I was 12 when my father first came to my room," Ruth began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He told me I was becoming a woman, that it was time for me to fulfill my purpose. I didn't understand what he meant, not at first." Ruth described years of abuse, of being told that her suffering was holy, that her tears were a sacrifice to God, that bearing her father's children was her divine calling. "When I had Samuel," Ruth continued, "I thought maybe it would stop. I thought maybe now that he had a son he'd leave me alone. But it didn't stop. It never stopped." Ruth explained that she'd tried to run away 3 times as a teenager. Each time her father found her and brought her back. The last time he broke her ankle to ensure she couldn't run again. "By the time Anna was born," Ruth said, tears streaming down her weathered face, "I was already broken. I knew what would happen to her. I knew Samuel would do to her what my father did to me, and I hated myself for not being strong enough to stop it." Margaret asked the question that had haunted her for years. "Why didn't you ask for help sooner? Why did you wait until you were dying?" Ruth's answer was chilling. "Because part of me still believed it was right. Part of me still heard my father's voice saying this was God's plan. It took me nearly dying to realize that no God would want this, that this was hell, not heaven. And by then it was almost too late." Ruth Whitlock died in 1993. She never got to fully reconcile with Anna, who struggled to forgive the mother who'd failed to protect her. But before Ruth died, she made one final contribution to her daughter's healing. She gave investigators the key to understanding the full scope of the Whitlock family history. Using Ruth's information, along with the documents found in the farmhouse, researchers pieced together the Whitlock family tree. What they discovered was a genealogical nightmare. The pattern had started with Anna's great-great-grandfather, Josiah Whitlock, around 1890. Josiah had been a fundamentalist preacher who'd broken away from his church over theological disputes about marriage and family. Josiah had developed a theology of divine patriarchy that placed all power in the hands of the father. He believed that marrying outside the immediate family diluted both bloodlines and spiritual authority. When his daughter, Mary, turned 15 in 1905, Josiah married her in a private ceremony. They had 3 children together, including a son named Abraham. Abraham continued the tradition, marrying his daughter Sarah in 1929. They had 5 children, 4 of whom died in infancy, likely due to genetic problems from inbreeding. The survivor was a boy named Thomas. Thomas married his daughter Catherine in 1952. They had 2 children, Samuel and a daughter who died at age 8. Samuel married his daughter Ruth in 1969. They had Anna in 1968. 4 generations of systematic father-daughter incest, justified by twisted theology and enforced by isolation. But here's what's truly terrifying. The Whitlock family wasn't unique. During the investigation, authorities discovered at least 3 other families in the Appalachian region with similar patterns. Isolated mountain families with their own traditions of keeping bloodlines pure. Most of those cases were never prosecuted. The families scattered before authorities could intervene. The children, if they were rescued at all, were placed in care under sealed records. The Whitlock case became public only because Anna, in her 30s, decided the story needed to be told. She wanted the world to know that this kind of horror still exists in modern America, that isolation and religious extremism can create pockets of nightmarish abuse right under society's nose. Today, Anna Whitlock lives under a different name, in a different state, far from the mountains of West Virginia. She's in her mid-50s now. She never married, never had children, but she's built a life that would have been unimaginable to that 16-year-old girl in the white dress. She works as a consultant for social services departments across the country, training caseworkers on how to identify and respond to extreme isolation abuse cases. She's helped rescue dozens of children from similar situations. In a 2018 interview with her face and voice disguised, Anna described what freedom means to her now. Freedom is waking up every morning and choosing what I want to do with my day. Freedom is having friends who respect my boundaries. Freedom is knowing that I'm a whole person, not someone's property. Freedom is understanding that I deserved better than what happened to me and that none of it was my fault. Anna also spoke about forgiveness. People ask me if I've forgiven my father. I don't know. Some days I think I have. Other days I'm so angry I can barely breathe. But I've learned that healing doesn't require forgiveness. It just requires refusing to let what happened define everything I am. She's been in therapy for over 30 years and says she'll probably be in therapy for the rest of her life. The trauma of her childhood doesn't just disappear. It's something she manages, works through, lives with, but she's surviving. More than that, she's thriving in her own way. I got out, she said in that interview. I learned the truth. I built a life. Not everyone who goes through what I did makes it that far. So yeah, I'm proud of myself. I'm proud that I'm still here. The Whitlock farmhouse stood empty for years after the arrests. Local teenagers would occasionally dare each other to hike up to it, though most got scared and turned back before reaching the property. Those who did make it to the house reported an overwhelming sense of wrongness. Cold spots even in summer. Sounds that didn't have sources. A feeling of being watched. In 1997, the house mysteriously burned down. The fire department's investigation was inconclusive. No evidence of arson, no lightning strikes, no electrical fire since there was no electricity. The official report simply stated, fire of unknown origin. Some locals whispered that Anna had finally returned and burned it herself, exorcising her demons. Others claimed it was teenagers playing with candles. A few said it was divine intervention, God finally cleansing that cursed place. Whatever the cause, the house burned to the foundation. No one ever rebuilt. Today, if you hike far enough into those West Virginia mountains, you can still find the ruins. A stone foundation, a collapsed chimney, some rusted farm equipment half buried in weeds. And if you're very quiet, some people say you can still hear echoes of the past, the sound of a young girl crying, the creak of floorboards under heavy boots, the whisper of a voice saying, "You're the chosen one." But those are just stories, ghost stories. The kind of tales people tell around campfires in these mountains. The real horror wasn't supernatural. It was all too human. Some secrets are buried deep in America's forgotten places, but the truth has a way of finding its way out, no matter how dark.